That's it. All right, episode 2. Welcome. This time we're talking about positioning and planning. I'm with Nick, Brian Z, and myself. We're all here. We're ready to provide what little knowledge we have about the game. It's a tough game. There's a lot out there. There's a lot of people reading things, not a lot of people explaining things. So, positioning. Let's go through the kinds of things we need to be looking for when we position. I've got a lot of kind of fun little diagrams for this episode, which we can use as we go. What we'll do though first is, let's just talk about these points kind of individually, I guess, and then we'll run through the examples on the side of the screen as we go. I've got here potentially a controversial point as number 1, which is obscuring is more powerful than cover, but it can make you a valid target. Obscuring provides you take one away from their successful rolls, and you cannot be crit, or they cannot retain crits. Which is, in cover, it's just you get an automatic save. So in my mind, having them take away an automatic success is the same thing, but you're still rolling 3 dice. Which on a 3 or 4 up feels, in my opinion, pretty good compared to just a pure cover save. Did anyone have any problems with that?
No, I don't even shoot at people if they can obscure anymore. If they're obscured, I just don't even bother most of the time.
It's not worth it.
It's not worth it. Get away from me.
Now,
I just want to crit.
There's obviously a couple of operatives that can ignore obscuring, but it's not super popular, right? Like, it's generally...
they're good. They're very good.
If they can. I can think of the death marks, obviously, for the higher attack.
The Phobos Reavers, I believe, can.
Okay, there you go. Okay,
which is pretty ball.
There is a couple of teams that you'll need to consider whether or not obscuring is what you want to do, I guess. The only one good thing about cover, in my mind, is obviously if you're concealed, you're not a valid target, whereas with obscuring, you are a valid target as soon as you're engaged. You can be concealed and be a valid target for obscuring, right? But you've just got to be an inch away from the terrain. So that would mean, that's kind of, okay. We're getting kind of nitty gritty. Let's move on. We'll get into that later. So you can be obscured while being shot at, but not be obscured or not have obscuring when shooting the same target. So let's have a quick look at that quickly, because that's a big point that I did not understand initially and has caused me some heartache in the past. So the targeting in the rulebook says that you draw a triangle from any point on your base to the width of the opponent's base. So in this diagram here, I've got the red basically drawing a cone from the outside edge of their base, picking up the blue, entirety of the blue base. We're 2.1 inches away, so there's no, we're outside of that kind of free-for-all scenario of 2 inches. And red has a clean shot at blue. However, when we go through to the next example, blue cannot draw the same lines back at red. So I think obscuring with positioning is really important, because it's not just like, can they take a shot, but it's, can you position in a way that will allow you to take advantage of the terrain and deny them the same opportunities. So with that, you can clearly see that we've got a targeting line that goes through that heavy terrain, and that then prevents blue from making a clean shot at red. That would be an obscured shot.
There's just an abundance of heavy terrain right now in Volcus, so there's potentially a lot of obscuring that you should be getting if you're positioning okay.
Yes, yeah, and again, like, once again, considering like cover has some advantages to it, I found that we personally have been utilizing obscuring a lot more frequently and to much better effect ultimately than just cover saves. So then the other half of this is when we get to positioning, using this exactly the same scenario with placement against walls. So a lot of, I think we've all made the mistake as beginners of just putting our models close up to the wall and then just being like, cool, they're safe. They're in cover. they've got the conceal order, nothing can target them. But
fight the edge.
Yes, yeah. I've now found that if I want to maintain cover, I always am 0.9 of an inch away from the wall. And if I don't want to maintain cover, I'm just an inch away from heavy terrain. And that is purely because of the fact that when we get to certain situations, for example, here, red and blue can shoot each other without penalty. So within 2 inches, if they've got vision of each other, they can just go for it. And that means that, you know, if you were just a 0.2 of an inch further away in this position, the red or blue, then you'd still have the cover, you'd still have the conceal, but you wouldn't be a valid target for shooting. So the positioning here becomes super important when you consider where you want to put your model up against a wall. And does anyone have anything to add there in terms of like distance? Has anyone found it's better to position up against the wall? Because we aren't professionals. So
I find every time I shoot, I get shot back like straight away. Maybe because I'm playing an elite team, and then I try to shoot you guys, and then you just shoot me back straight away.
Yeah,
the scenario is also very good if, say, your opponent is trying to get covered, they're on the conceal, and they think maybe I'll just sit on the subjective, be safe. You know, you can run right up to them,
yes,
and just blast them in the face without having to potentially charge them. Maybe if you don't want to charge them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely that's. I think we'll cover that as well, where it's like the charging thing and the melee then is another situation which we'll look at right now. So if blue was to charge. That wall there, let's pretend that continues on, but we've got greater than an inch, then they're no longer a meleeable target in that scenario. So this is a really big one, like we touched on last time with shooting versus melee teams. If you're a shooting team, you want to avoid the melee at all costs generally, and positioning can really help you do that. If you're stacking yourself up against the wall, I guess stacking yourself up the wall, right, helps with your cover lines, ultimately, for conceal. So that can be something. But once you get to kind of turning point 2 and 3 and 4, once your enemies are within that kind of 10 inches of you, that becomes a whole different scenario. Turning point 1, it's like whatever, put them up against there if you feel like you have to. But turning point 2 and onwards, these are really important things to consider. And if you don't have the terrain, you can add it with the equipment, i.e. heavy barricades or something along them lines. So
that heavy arm.
What's that? Sorry, dude.
Get that heavy.
Yeah. You want heavy so nice most of the time.
Yeah.
So obviously with the heavy terrain as well, vantage doesn't matter. So heavy's really something to consider when, you know, if there is a lot of vantage around Volcus, for example, as long as you've got the conceal or you're not visible, vantage is irrelevant to the shooting in a sense. So, picking your positioning, just kind of making a mental note of where you need to be. So basically, going back to our key points, placement against the walls needs to be considered. You need to be thinking about where you're positioning your models compared to where the enemy can either A, get to, or B, do once they get there. I.e., are they going to try and melee you, or are they going to shoot you to death? That's something that's really important to keep in mind. Equipment can help, especially on maps like Into the Dark, where there's very little intervening terrain for you to move up safely, and we'll go over some examples of that soon. And then other considerations are blast and torrent. So stacking multiple guys up might give you the cover they need to not be a target, but if someone is able to get back there with a torrent weapon or a blast weapon, which I've made this mistake many a times now, there's a good chance they take out 2 or 3 of your operatives in a single shooting action, which is horrific to try and come back from. So definitely, keep that in mind as well. You may need to just space them that 1.1 inches apart, for example, which will help with melee in terms of the control range, and with torrent and blast for particular weapons. Did you guys have anything else to add with I mean, positioning is such a big thing, right? It's so hard to, like, we can give you 30 different examples, but it'll only ever cover 5% of the scenarios you find yourselves in. Is there any kind of hard and fast rules you find yourself referring to? I know, Nick, you said just you don't shoot into obscuring anymore.
Don't do it, guys. Don't do it. Don't waste your time. No,
it's not worth it.
Just remember, movement is like in some, in 40k especially, the movement phase and your movement actions is what defines a, potentially a casual player from a competitive player. So that your movement is some of your most important things. It's impossible for us to cover it all, but just, remember the movement is an ongoing skill you'll develop throughout playing. It'll take time.
Yeah, to get right. We're hoping that these kinds of discussions will help build that knowledge faster, because when we started playing, it's not just knowing how to position, but it's also knowing how to exploit the positions to benefit yourself. So like I said before, obscuring's so good in this edition that in my mind, you might as well take obscuring over cover in most scenarios. Especially for particular teams, that can provide automatic saves. That can just be massive, because you can essentially just throw 2 dice away a turn of your opponents. So definitely something to keep in mind and to consider as you move on. So what I wanted to highlight here is this is a game I played recently against the Mandrakes, and what I wanted to point out was just targeting lines. So targeting lines, much like in the previous drawings with the little triangles, they all provide kind of alleyways where shooting's possible and areas that you need to consider. So in this scenario, red at the bottom here can kind of see these areas very easily without moving at all. This means that them kind of areas effectively could be considered dead zones for the blue player in this scenario, just because entering it and staying there means that they're gonna have the ability to be shot without really being able to contest that or use cover to stop it at all. And then vice versa with the blue team, these are the kind of cover lines that make it very difficult for the red player to intercede with. With Vantage opens up that dramatically. So when you're at Vantage, you kind of can almost use a 180-degree semicircle to see out from that Vantage position, with only interceding heavy terrain stopping you from drawing targeting lines. So they can be quite substantial. I know that this is something that we've really kind of struggled with in the past in terms of like moving up the board. So this middle objective on this map, for example, is just so open. You can really only sit in, right on the edge, like we were drawing with our images just before, to have any kind of cover or save. And as soon as an operative crosses the midline, then they're going to have full view of the other side of that heavy terrain in the center as well. So this is just something that it can seem kind of hopeless to move in some scenarios. I know, Briansy, with the Plague Marines recently, maybe you felt a little bit like this, where it's positioning.
Yeah, especially playing against a shooter team.
Yeah,
trying to get an objective and get it in the open, and you're not having much cover.
Yeah, I think this is actually the map we played. Is that correct as well?
Maybe.
Yeah, it looks very similar. I was kind of just thinking about it when I reviewed this. But
no, we were playing a bit different, but it was like same structures.
Most of the Volcus is always similar, just slightly different layouts.
Yeah, if you're going for the crit op and you're trying to get into the middle and you're trying to activate that that objective marker. That's the hardest positioning right there. Like, you've got to get out there, and generally you're probably going to just sacrifice an operative to be able to get out there.
Yeah.
Especially if you're playing against a shooting team. Just, that's so open.
Yes.
Was that rock feature? Was that light terrain? Or was that heavy?
So the items that are tinted red here are light. Everything else is heavy.
Yeah.
So it's definitely
a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
Like, whoever goes out there first, and when we played the other night with the Plague Marines, I chucked my icon bearer straight in the middle there to cap the point, and it had to be sacrificed because I wasn't going to move anything else out there just yet to activate that marker without giving it up to you.
Well, that was an interesting one as well, because I believe you'd moved the icon bearer onto the midpoint to do that, and I had snipers up on vantage, which couldn't shoot you, but that went back to that whole within 2 inches thing where I ran up to the barrier in between us and just shot through it to get you in that scenario.
I couldn't do anything to respond.
Yeah. So the positioning's tough. That's the toughest part of this game, is getting it right.
Yeah. I think it just depends on what is your goal? What are you focusing on with your kill team, and is the crit up something that you're able to achieve really easily, or is it going to be a bit of a slog to get to, or is it dependent on the opposing team? Like, there's a lot of factors there that you need to think about before you think about your positioning.
So the blue player at the top there, you can see their ladder placement, especially on the right-hand stronghold. He'd place a ladder to get right up there. So, for example, in this game, my plan as the red player was not to worry about the crit at all. I was going to just kill and tack, and that's it. Because the crits are so open and so accessible. And I in my opinion, I thought the blue player had better targeting lines to target that middle than I could achieve from my side of the board. And they could rush the vantage on that right-hand stronghold, which gave them an opportunity to shoot down into it, which I was worried about also. So I just said, I'm not going to worry about the crit op at all. I'm going to just let them score the 6 points there. I'm going to hope that they don't take their primary as the crit, so they get an additional 3 points. And I'm just going to try and nail the tack, score the 6 points on the tack, and then just kill as many operatives as I can in the meantime.
And that's the thing; it worked out for you.
It did. That did in that scenario. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's don't feel like you've got 3 ways to score 6 points. So just pick 2 that are gonna, that you feel confident in doing. Sometimes they can align in terms of like confirm kill and scoring the kill up, because you're going to be doing 2 in the 1 in that scenario. That way your demands on having to focus on multiple different objectives diminishes, and you can just position to kind of kill things because you're achieving 2 objectives with the one kind of play style. So definitely, in this game it was against the Mandrakes. The Mandrakes set up a shadow portal to that midpoint, and they just portaled in, capped it, were on conceal, and then just the next turn portaled back out and portaled another guy in and capped it. And I just couldn't do anything about it. And it was great to see, because they were able to just do it so successfully without any real interaction from myself. But that didn't win them the game ultimately, because I was able just to deny them their tack and then just out kill them on the kill op. So definitely consider. You don't have to position yourself to score the crit if it doesn't favor you. The enemy might be thinking, or the opposition might be thinking exactly the same thing. And in that sense, it's, you might be able to sneak a sneaky point here or there to just bring it up and over the line.
Yeah.
Nick, did you have anything you wanted to add, especially in relation to Volcus? I've got a few Into the Dark maps and examples coming up shortly.
Yeah, Into the Dark, it really is a completely different game mode. So that's something to, whenever people are playing, it's something to be like, oh, we're playing something. And Beta Testament is also just like, what's happening?
Everything.
But generally for positioning as well, so with deployment, the best advice I ever got for deployment, which is deploy as if you're always going second. So that means try not to put as much as you want to. Try not to put guys in super aggressive positions that you're like, if I go first, I can do X, Y, Z, because it just makes it really swingy. So just deploy as if it was going second, and generally within your deployment zone as well, you shouldn't be able to really kind of get shot from their deployment zone.
Yeah.
So
there
should be enough terrain there as well to not let that happen.
So this map was exactly that, Nick, where on the right-hand side we have that light terrain. I wanted to put operatives there to bait the guy into thinking I was going for that objective, the right objective, which I think I did to a degree because he's put 6 out of his 9 models on the right-hand side of the board.
Yeah.
I didn't care about that objective at all, but I wanted him to think I cared. And then the other thing was that he had the ladder leading up to that vantage, which meant that the light terrain wouldn't have counted for being a valid target or not. I would have just been a valid target immediately. So I deliberately didn't, even though I wanted to put guys there, I didn't, because I knew he could just get up and shoot them, and then I would be, losing an operative almost on the first turning point, which is a massive disadvantage. So I had to stage a little bit more cautiously here towards the middle of the board. And then my entire plan for this game was to just go to the stronghold on the left and just hold that stronghold and try and cap that crit point and kill as many guys as I could. Which was hilarious because the Mandrax player ended up capping that crit point on the left twice out of the 3 potential times. So even in that scenario, they were able just to stage up on the back of that stronghold. I'm so slow moving, I couldn't get there to stop them. And they just capped it, 2 times, out of the 3, and just made me look silly. But that was because they positioned well and took advantage of that heavy terrain. So okay, well let's move on to Into the Dark, because like you touched on, Nick, it's a whole different game. It feels like you're playing a different game to Volcus. Volcus is very cagey. Volcus is very much like, keep that heavy terrain. You got cover all the time. Shooting lanes are kind of narrow to a degree. Into the Dark is just like a slaughter fest in terms of some of the rooms and bits and pieces. So I want to show you guys a few different things I was kind of looking at in terms of placement and in terms of shooting. So here we've got 2 operatives contesting a very large and open room. We have doorways to the left side center of the map, and then we have a doorway to the right side of the thing, top and bottom, where the 2 operatives are positioned. So the red operative at the bottom of the screen this time has quite a large area where it can shoot, covering both doors, and importantly the point in the center. And then very much like that, the blue operative has the same kind of positioning with the same kind of vision. So this room looks like, especially with Into the Dark having guard as an option, this room looks like just a situation where you're just going to get blasted as soon as you walk through the door.
And guard's going to change a lot of your positioning as well. So that's going to be your main thing, is combating guard and trying to work
baiting the guard.
What you're doing with guard.
Yeah, absolutely. So for people who don't know, which we didn't initially, on Into the Dark, you can perform guard, which is where you engage your operative and then he will sit there until the end of the turning point. At any point, another operative or an enemy operative comes into his field of view and ends a movement or performs an action whilst within that view. He can retaliate with a shoot action against that operative, or a fight, I believe, right, if it's close enough. So
any action,
yeah. So ultimately, Into the Dark becomes very interesting because you can, much like kind of chess, you can set up pieces to counter your opponent's potential moves. So in this scenario, what we've done is we're going to add a secondary player to each team, and we're going to basically want to try and cap that point. The red player at the bottom of the screen's bought a heavy barricade. They've put it 6 inches or 5 inches away from the door, within 4 of their deployment zone, which would take the 5 and a bit inches to move to, which they're hoping will, provide cover for their operative to get closer to the point and score it. But what we can see is it works in terms of the blue player's shooting angles, but it also hinders the red player's shooting angles pretty significantly. So you're allowing, in this scenario, even if you are on guard, the second operative on the blue team, in the kind of the center of the board there, to move in onto that point and not be able to stop them or do anything about it effectively. Which is it's bad, right? There's not really any other way around that. You're kind of just handicapping yourself. You've effectively almost wasted a piece of terrain, because even if your operative can move up to it, they can't move around it without being shot by the on guard unit at the top of the map there. So what happens if we kind of change that position? So in this position, they're both fine. But if you're a shooting team, you're going to get charged by the blue player potentially, and that charge would be able to happen without the guard going off, I believe, of the red player at the bottom, because you'd be able to fight around the edge of that terrain piece without being visible to the guard. So I don't think that this seems like a no-brainer decision. Like, I've definitely made this choice in the past, and then I've had it fail on me multiple times. Because when we go to this next slide, this is where we've got vision still. So we're definitely just kind of stuck behind that heavy barricade then, ultimately. Did anyone have anything to add to that in terms of like ways around it? Or
if the barricade was more to the right, near the wall there, I think that gives more opportunity for that cover.
Okay.
From that.
I think I've actually got that.
Player?
I think I've actually got that, Risey. Yep.
Yeah.
So then, as we can see, their targeting lines for the red player then become problematic in terms of getting to shoot the blue player before he can either cap the point or charge your operative.
Yeah.
So Briansy, a little bit to the right. That's your decision. That's what
I'm talking about.
Okay.
Maybe.
Let's have a look then. So we significantly cut off the blue player's targeting lines in terms of our access way. However, and we've also significantly diminished our targeting lines in terms of our shooting. So this makes it a little bit problematic in terms of the fact that we'll go back one slide. In terms of the fact that we've hamstrung ourselves, whereas now we can't see one half of the board almost. So that northern or that top access point on the right-hand side of the board, they might be able to flood that with operatives, and we'll never get to guard against it. And they can make it all the way to our door without a valid shot being able to be taken. So that means we have to waste turns reactivating and repositioning to move to the heavy barricade and look around it, where they can then kind of play around that in their own positioning and bits and pieces. Do you guys have any other thoughts around this kind of scenario with the heavy barricade? I know it's a bit of a weird one. Okay, so this was another option I was considering with heavy barricade placement, where we once again place it so we've got it within the kind of 5 inches of movement we'll have available once going through the access point from our operative on the bottom. And then we have the two blue team operatives in the same position, yet this time our shooter is halfway up the board, which will then provide pretty much the same as last time. We've got the enemy shooter, or the blue shooter, able to see the majority of our board still. It does provide a little bit of cover there with the heavy terrain, but our shooting then becomes a little bit more hampered. We're seeing much less, effectively a third of that area compared to almost all of it with our initial position. This would kind of, in my mind, give us a better chance at the top access way in terms of shooting and covering, but it leaves us open, as we can see in this next slide, to just being charged through that access way, which is just, if you've got someone covering on guard to shoot, you don't want them being charged. You want them as far away from the charge as possible. So,
just as well, like, so if you're guarding, maybe the guy's capable of melee, but if you're guarding and you get charged, you can interrupt, or you get to then fight. You can activate your guard to fight from that charge. So you do get to fight first.
Yeah.
Guarding,
yeah.
But if it's a dedicated shooting, you're kind of screwed.
Yes, yeah. So I think I was looking at this scenario as a shooting scenario, but you're 100% right. Like, if you're playing a melee team, this is a fully different scenario, I guess, ultimately, right? Where you wanna get as close to the enemy as you can without being seen, which in this case would be to use this access way to the bottom left, to get up and close, and then you're pressuring that middle point also. That's at kind of to the top left there. So yeah, definitely, I think 100% Nick, where melee's got a different play style than shooting does. Yeah. Okay, and then I've got one other potential option here, which is double light, which seems potentially wasteful, right? To put 2 light barricades in a single room. However, unless the enemy has seek light, I think this would be the way to go. So we have 2 light barricades, the staging for which is important given the guard action is a thing into the dark. So with the shooting profiles, we can ignore the light unless you're concealed and within an inch of it. So shooting will happen throughout this entire map for both teams. The light barricades make very little difference unless you're on top of them. So in this scenario, I've got the model here moving 5 inches, like 6 in total, but take 1 for the doorway, with the red, and then a dash with the orange. So the importance of this is he finishes his reposition at this position within an inch of the light cover, which will provide cover from the shooter at the top there, because he doesn't have his full base active or available to see. So once he ends his reposition, he's still in cover with a conceal order. And then he can dash to that other point and be just touching the objective, like radius, without having ever been a valid target in that scenario. Yeah. And then he's positioned, even against an elf with a 9-inch charge, more than 1.1 inches away. So he's also safe from the charge. So in this scenario, the double light barricades, although they're not typically as useful as the heavies, provides a way to get from the doorway to that objective point without being shot and without being charged, which I think is super handy. These are the kind of little things where, like we said, initially that heavy barricade looked fine, but then when you kind of play it out and you math it out, it takes 5 games or 10 games to kind of work out, oh, wait a second, the heavy barricade's not really that handy in this scenario. Lights might be a better option. Or with a guard, for example, against another shooting team, how am I getting from point A to B with a relocation and a dash without being shot? Go for it.
You're kind of forcing the guard option to not be a valid thing to use if you're...
Well, that's the best thing, right? If someone goes on guard, it's a waste of an APL if they can't use it. It's a deterrent, as Nick talked about in the last episode, and it can provide some value in terms of people not wanting to activate the guard, but it can be played around, which I really want to kind of stress in terms of this positioning, is that, like, it's very easy just to put a unit on guard and have him look at a room, but it's much harder to move through that guard without triggering it and still do what you need to do, kind of thing, which I think is super important.
Especially when you're playing against two APL
Yes.
board teams. Like it's just a waste of going on guard. So this red player down the bottom, they're able. Is it red? Were you saying red?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this red player down the bottom is able to just force them to waste an APL,
Yes.
positioning themselves, and then wasting an APL to guard. And it seems like it's ineffective for the blue team, but it also can be very effective in those other scenarios with the heavy barricade that
Yes.
you showed before.
Yeah.
It can be very effective. It can slow down the opposing team completely, or risk losing an operative or two.
Yeah. As like the heavy's great for a shooter to hide behind, right? Ultimately.
Yeah.
But it doesn't provide good cover, usually in terms of repositioning, because it's just first of all, you can only put it within 4 inches of your drop zone. So that limits how far out. Like the light barricades is wholly within your terrain, so you've got much more flexibility with that. And yeah, ultimately, like unless there's seek light, which will just shoot through the barricades, then you do have a lot more flexibility. Because even light barricades, you can use them in 2 different rooms to set up this kind of scenario. But yeah, definitely these are the kinds of things that we were getting caught out on initially, where you think, I'm just going to put something there to block the opposition, but in blocking the opposition, you're also blocking yourself. So what does it how does it benefit you to do that in a sense?
I agree.
Nick, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that? Just
I agree. It's so much.
It's so hard to go through every possible scenario when it comes to positioning, because it's such it feels like it's 60 to 70% of the game is just positioning well, and then the rest of it's just dice.
Just to add on, you'll find a lot of guarding. There'll be so much guarding, and it'll vary between players. But a lot of people try to just guard you out on guard up. So just be wary of that. There's going to be some people really like to put the guard on. That'll be something you have to try to play around and move around.
Because this is another thing with the guard, dude, where it's like, if you can have one operative guard this room and one other operative snatch this point, then that's 2 operatives out of potentially 8, which frees you up 6 to focus on the other 2 objectives. Or if you're playing on a horde team, for example, you might have 2 or 3 operatives here, a comms guy to grant an extra APL, a sniper, and a trooper to get out there. And then you've still got 9 operatives for the other 2 objectives, which, at the end of the day, these big, empty, open rooms are problematic in the terms that you need to waste some resources on getting to them, but you don't want to waste all your resources because it's only 1 out of 3 objectives on the field. So you want to do it with the least amount of people as possible. So if you can get here in this turn, cap this point, you then force the blue player to react on either this turning point or the next one. Otherwise, you're just going to cap it again. And in getting him to react, that opens up your potential guard at the bottom corner there, which means that in that scenario, you're hopefully getting a free kill and the actual crit up point in this scenario. So definitely, when we talked about trading last turn in terms of units against each other, you're also trading units for points against each other. So in this scenario, your trade is favorable as a red player because you haven't had to waste an operative to cap that point. But the blue player is very much in the position where he would have to. So just keep that in mind, have a bit of a plan, which takes us through to our next point, planning. So guys, this is some planning I did recently for a game, which didn't end as well as I was hoping, but I wanted to just run through why it's so important. So, Nick, can I get you to run through some dot points here, and we'll have a bit of a discussion about planning, because I got the advice to plan when I started playing, and I was like, there's no point planning because I don't know anything that's going on. I can only play reactively. But we need to change that mindset. So we're going to talk about a few ways to get that done.
So when you're kind of getting into a match, just generally just try to map out your first 2 turns. So that's also like what I said before. Your deploys if you're going second, that way you don't get blown off the board if they're going first. That's, in Galadark, there's a lot less of an issue. You know, unless you see on the right-hand side there's a door there, right? There are very few situations where they're actually going to be able to punish you on going on an aggressive deployment. So you have a bit of leeway there for Galadar. For instance, you can kind of forward deploy or deploy not in cover sometimes. If there's not a door there or you don't think they're going to be able to make that door straight away. So look at your primary ops, look at your crit ops, look at your attack ops. Ask yourself, what do I want to do this turn? Meditate to yourself, how do I want to score these points this turn? What am I going to do to win? Not just clash the models together and try to kill each other. If that is your strategy, then go for it. But still, ask yourself, how am I going to win? That's the question. How am I going to win? Consider your opponent's likely moves based off the map. So, look at the deployment. Look where the models are bunched up. Look what they potentially could be doing, and you can potentially try to summarize what their attack ops are as well. There's only a couple good ones, so you can kind of try to summarize what they're trying to do and try to counterplay or go for it. And then when it comes to equipment, so after you deploy, the equipment's a big one. So especially on Galadark, you want your light barricades. When you have your barricades, suddenly razor wire becomes really important. Suddenly mines become really good because then you can block up doorways, jam up those access ways. Just kind of look at the map, think to yourself what you're going to be able to do, what your opponent's going to be trying to do, how you're going to try to get around that. It's a bit 3D chess. If he does that, I'm going to do this. If they do this, I'm going to do that. But your opponent's always going to do things you're not expecting. So just be ready to adapt as well. Always be ready to be flexible.
Absolutely. This was a good example, this map, where I was going up against the Goremongers, which have so much movement. And what I really wanted to do is just not get charged. So I kind of drew the charge lines of what their 12 inches or 11 inches of potential charge looks like. Is that right? 10 inches. I can't remember. 10 inches, I think. So I really wanted to just make sure that I couldn't get charged because I was playing a team that didn't do well in melee, and I wanted to make sure that I stayed out of it for as long as possible. So drawing the charge lines just really helped me identify what was kind of safe for the first turning point to position, and then where to fall back to in the second turning point to avoid that second turn charge. The other thing I think with the planning that's super important is to just consider not only work out how you want to score your points, but then also maybe think about an operative or two that you can throw out there to deny the enemy their points. So in this position here, the topmost point in terms of the rightmost point, I figured because of the enemy's movement, they're going to have the biggest chance to score that and the best opportunity to lock that room down before I can get to it. So I want to just throw some operatives up there just as a bit of a diversionary tactic and just to try and pressure that point, even though I had no intention of actually taking it. That was my notes down the bottom there. Just says turning point 1, Apprentech, Plasma Sight, Nanomine, top objective, and which was just to basically open the door, throw a nanomine down there, make it look like I had some intentions to go in that direction, but ultimately it was more of just a ruse to avoid having to deal with all the operatives in the midpoint, which I needed to get to for my attack op. So planning's really tough when you start because it's tough to know what each team does, how the maps work. I think we all still read the crit ops a couple of times to ensure we understand exactly how they work. But it is a lot to think about. Hopefully you're playing against someone who will give you a little bit of time just to go through that. The other option is if you can organize a game with somebody and just get the map and the crit op organized like 5 or 6 hours before you start, or the day before you start, kind of thing. Say, hey, can we play tomorrow? Can we play this map and this crit op? And then that way you've got the 24 hours just to think and run through scenarios in which you can position or you can play to give yourself the best chance of winning. In this game, I'll show you what ended up happening on the first turning point. If you take note of where I thought the blue circus is, where I thought the Goremongers would be prior to the game beginning, and on this side we have their actual position. So it lined up pretty closely in terms of, we have guys at the top door on the left hand side, the central doors, 2 on one side, 1 on the other. And then we have 3 operatives on the top right of the map that haven't quite moved into that room yet. So compared to my initial layout, I was almost bang on, except for the positioning of 2 operatives. The central one, which would have been back at the door, and we only had 1 on the left objective compared to the 2 I've got there. So I was very close to estimating where the opponent was going to be, which just meant I had a better chance of covering him off in that scenario than if I just went in there without thinking about it at all. So consider your what you want to achieve in the game. Set up your operatives to, play in a way that gives them, like, once again, the guys on the right-hand side of the screen, I put 3 guys up there just to get him to put resources onto that objective, even though I wasn't interested in it. Plan a way of putting your guys in a position where you're going to waste the opponent's time as much as possible. Because if he's got to waste 2 turns moving to somewhere that you don't really care about, then you've given yourself potentially a sizable difference on the other end of the board where you're actually focusing your efforts on. But yeah, Briansy, did you have anything you wanted to add to the planning side of things?
No, not really, mate. I think I'm still, as like a beginning player, like I'm still a beginner. I think having time to think about your kill team and what you're going to do to set up prior to the game can be great. But if you're just coming in for a casual game, talk with your opponent about what you're going to do and what they're going to do. It's okay to have those conversations, because you can only learn, you can only get better, and the important thing is that you're enjoying the game as well. So if you're playing a casual game, have those conversations. This is where I was thinking of setting up. You might set up first and then have the conversation about what would you have chosen if you were playing my team. It's okay to have those conversations.
I definitely know we've been really lucky with some of the local guys in our area that have taken the time to play kind of beginner games with us, where they just talk about, every time we do something, they'll say, okay, this is good because of this, but it's bad because of that. It kind of gives you that experience to understand that all your decisions have multiple outcomes. And what do them outcomes look like? Are they favorable or not favorable for you in the long run? Definitely playing against more experienced players is really handy. I've had a few games with just random people now on TTS, and they've pretty much all been lovely, even though they've crushed me in every game I've played. So it's definitely helped me to learn a lot. Exactly like you said, like, listen, I'm new. This is my team. This is what I want to try and do. Like, is there an easy way that you can stop that? Or how would you play if this was my intention, kind of thing? Having nice open conversations when you're starting out and when they're casual games. You're not playing for points. You're not trying to win a tournament. So there's no real harm in giving away that information or having that information shared. Because at the end of the day, the dice is still going to do what the dice do.
That's right.
Which could be anything. Right. So, yeah.
Unfavorable for me.
Well, yeah, we all have our nights, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. Nick, did you have anything you wanted to add just in terms of planning? I know that we were considering doing some practice matches of tournament games that we've got coming up.
Yeah, just do an open game. That's the best way to learn, everyone. So you just talk through about what you want to do, like Brian Z and Nick said. Just talk it through. Find someone better than you. and then get them to kind of teach you or run through what their decision making is, because that's ultimately what it comes down to. And you'll get better over time. So you'll refine your team, refine your game, refine how you want to play, and those opening starts will set you up for success, hopefully.
Yeah, even if you're not having open games, playing games against better people and just getting stomped, it doesn't hurt at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like, you're still learning things as long as you keep it an open mind and kind of being
What are they
positive.
doing? Look at what they're doing.
Yeah, look at what they do. Look at how they position. Look at what opportunities they present you. A lot of the time you'll find that it's like you think you're going to get a chance to shoot, and they just put their operative somewhere where all of a sudden you've got no available way to target them whatsoever. So, yeah, definitely get stomped a bunch. And then get the reps in. That's something else we've been saying to each other, where it's just like the more games you play, the more comfortable you get with the system, the more you learn to kind of exploit the rules or take advantage of them to suit your own, your own ends. So just like we just constantly talk about grinding games. So just get in there and grind games. Get the games done.
Your reps.
Get your reps. Get your reps for Jesus. Just get them done. Get the games done. Play as many as you can, and eventually you just start to learn the nuance of the game and the system, which is huge because it's pretty unique as far as mechanics goes, I think. I mean, obviously, Nick, with 40k, there's probably similarities to a degree, but compared to other skirmish games that we've tried in the past or other war games, the whole conceal, engage orders and things like that are definitely pretty specific and pretty hard to learn initially in terms of how they can be utilized. One other big thing I just wanted to touch on is, like, if your operative can't do anything for the turn, it's not a bad thing necessarily. It does feel like a waste sometimes to just activate an operative and have it do nothing. But at the end of the day, it's much better than putting it somewhere it shouldn't be and having it get blown off the board, because you're just giving your opponent kill lot points in that scenario. So don't feel bad just like activating an operative and just leaving it there for that. But yeah, I think that's about it for positioning and planning. Did anyone have anything else?
No, I think that's good, bro.
Beautiful. All right, we'll catch you next time. Are we doing our little outro?
We're finished already?
I think we're finished. Quick one.
My God, we'll definitely get 1,000 in.
Okay.
Yeah, we got road to 1,000.
Road to 1,000.
Okay.
998 to go.